Hey everybody, Justin Pittman here again from Precision Fly and Tackle. We're here live with Mike Heck. Before we get started, again, we appreciate everybody that's starting to tune in. If you can and are tuned in, please share and like this link. It only helps get the word out there more for us. So again, we are here with my dear friend Mike Heck. I can't thank Mike enough for coming in tonight. I truly look at Mike as a mentor, a very close friend, and in my opinion, one of the best trout guides in central Pennsylvania. There is nobody that has a mindset and a knowledge for our streams locally in Pennsylvania that Mike does. So Mike, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Before we get started, we're going to talk a little bit tonight. We got some questions we received over the last week. We got some questions here from Mike. I want to remind everybody, Mike is obviously a guide here at Central PA. He's also an author of Spring Creek Strategies. You're going to be able to find Mike's book if you are interested in purchasing it and don't already have it. We'll put a link at the bottom of this video that you can go to Mike's website and purchase that. And that, Mike, what is your website?
My website is www.fallingsprings.com.
And again, we'll put a link to that so that you can reach out to Mike. Mike, before we get started with the questions, why don't you give us a rundown? If someone's to book a guide trip with Mike Heck here on one of our local streams, what does that day look like?
The day really details to the person. I've guided from rank beginners, person who grabs a fly rod right out of the case, to the most advanced. Some of these guys may even know more than I do. And that's a great privilege to me because I actually learn from them some different patterns, some different techniques, which makes us all better fly fishermen. My trips are adjusted to what they want to do. If they want to learn how to cast, fly fish spring creeks, fly fish the mountain trout streams, I adjust my whole entire day according to what they want to do. It's up to them and not me.
Well, and one thing to note for Mike, because I want to boost Mike up a little bit. Mike is well known for many of our viewers out there for being one of the top limestone spring guides in the area. But Mike also is a regular guide on the Yellow Breeches, the Little Juniata River. Mike guides all over. Is he well known for the Latort? Is he well known for Big Spring? Yes, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that I think both beginners and advanced anglers can get from this presentation tonight to fine-tune some of their skills, including myself. Again, like I said earlier, we will have a link to Mike Heck's guide service. If you are looking to book a trip with Mike, you can contact Mike directly. Again, www.fallingsprings.com, Mike Heck's trout service, or you can reach us here at Precision Fly and Tackle, and we can set you up with a guide trip with Mike. So Mike, our first question here is, here at the shop, one of the biggest things that we see, and one of probably the biggest sellers in our shop right now in both locations, is this whole Euro nymphing game. And I know, reading your book, being around you a lot over the years, you kind of are like me, you fall into what I consider some of the older traditional fly fishermen. Talk to me a little bit, what's your fishing style? And let's just use like the Big Spring, for example. What's your fishing style or approach to the Big Spring?
My fishing style actually really depends on the conditions. Many times I go out to the stream and you got excited anglers ready to tie on flies, ready to tie on everything, let's go fish. And I got a very, very quick approach to it as I wrote on Spring Creek Strategies. You got to make a quick decision, A and B, trout rising, trout not rising. Look at the stream first, don't tie on your stuff at the parking lot, and then adjust to what the stream wants. If the trout aren't rising, of course, you go underneath. So at that point, I go with the nymphing leaders. Your nymphing's great. I like the longer leaders. I've actually guided a lot of people from Italy and England that go with those long 10, sometimes 12-foot leaders. They work great. It's an old, from one of my great friends, Joe Humphrey style. With the longer leaders, you don't get much friction, you don't get much drag. You can use those leaders and you don't have to use a lot of split shot. You can get flies down a lot quicker. A lot of times in these spring creeks, maybe a brass bead or something may not work on, say, like big springs and all that, but you can get away with like your white beads, your black beads, if you're going to do the traditional Euro nymphing with the upside down hooks. If you look at the other version of the side B and fish are rising, look at the rise forms. See if they're rising high, see if they're rising low, see if they're just pecking, and adjust your leader accordingly, and maybe go with the higher dry flies. Say if they are sipping the higher blue wing olives or your sulfurs, of course, this time of year. If you see them just pecking or just making that bulge on the surface, then of course you go with your emergers or maybe a sunken nymph.
Now, Mike, let me stop you there for a second because I want to ask you something for our audience out there. Explain to our audience what you mean by pecking.
Pecking, I just mean pecking at the surface. Of course, you high rise. Fish come up. You can see the bulge. You can see their head and nose come out of the water, back down in the water. A caddis take, for instance. Fish get very excited with caddis. Sometimes you see a lot of splashy rises. That there's an indication you may have the caddis either egg laying or hatching, because if the egg lay, they may hit the water and dive in, or they may hit the water and bounce up and down. But the pecking rise, I see a lot of times with the midges and the sunken nymphs and all that. They'll just come up, just peck at the surface. You'll just see this tiny little, just the rise of the water, so to speak.
Almost like a push.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And that's why I consider a pecking rise. And that's where I will start putting on some midge pupas, some sunken nymphs, or maybe some CDC emergers, something that just sinks a little bit lower in the water.
Okay. So let's talk about leaders. We get a lot of questions in here about leaders. We get a lot of fishermen that come in that are talking about breaches, but then we get the anglers are coming in to talk about essentially the Letort Big Spring. And as you know, a lot of our spring creeks, Falling Springs, Big Spring, Letort, what we're familiar with right here in Central PA, we get a lot of vegetation, LED and some other invasive grasses. Do you still, and do you currently, do you tie your own leaders, or do you find yourself fishing a lot of pre-made, pre-manufactured leaders?
I actually do both now.
Okay.
I like building my own leaders because through the years of building my own leaders, if I need to change things a little bit, if I am in a tighter situation, if I need to get a roll to tip it, I can change things.
Okay.
But with that said, building your own leaders, you have a bunch of knots. So come summertime, when you have the Eladia, you have the watercress on the surface, those knots sometimes get caught in those blades, and it can change a great drift into a bad drift. Whereas your pre-built leaders, no knots, it can slide right down through that watercress, Eladia just fine.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that because we have at both our stores, but one of the things we do encourage from a lot of our anglers, we get a lot of seasoned anglers come in that have started to perfect building out leaders, especially our Euro guys that are building out long leaders. And that's something we talk about quite a bit. When you start with a traditional manufactured leader, are you using tippet rings?
No.
No tippet rings. So
I don't. I will use it. Well, yes and no.
Okay.
Sorry. I will use tippet rings fishing nymphs.
Okay.
Simply because fishing nymphs, you can throw that long tippet on, break off, there's a tippet ring.
Correct.
With dry flies, sometimes I still feel that tippet ring sinks.
Okay. Good. And that's what we want to hear. All right. So talk to me about this. For the new fisherman, for someone who walks into this shop or books Mike Heck for a day on the water, and their first day, or they come in and they call Mike Heck and say, Mike, what is the biggest piece of advice that you can give someone for their first trip to your traditional Big Spring or Letort? What, if you're going to give them one piece of advice, what is it when they approach what we would all consider a hard stream?
That's an excellent question. You can simplify spring creeks in a few ways. But let me go into an article I wrote back in, I think, 1997. It was for American Angler, Think Like a Predator. Big Springs, Fallen Springs, Letort are very dissimilar to, say, the Yellow Breeches, where you can kind of traditionally walk into them and fish. You got to think like a predator. They know their environment, dress appropriately, but practice stalk, sneak around. You know, don't try to just jump up and down the banks. You're going to be more of an upstream approach, but more consistent is to fish in these spring creeks. Be very, very patient. These streams will come around to you. Again, back what we said earlier, A and B. Just don't jump out in the water and say, hey, I'm going to fish dry flies today. If the fish aren't rising, it's probably not going to happen. You got to go according to the fish. Secondly, probably the easiest thing I know, what I tell the anglers that email me or text me or I guide with, if they're very experienced anglers on spring creeks are very flat in most places. Mm-hmm. The most glassy flats you can find in the world probably. And that is the most difficult fish you can try to catch. I tend to take inexperienced anglers to riffles, where the water's more broken up, you have more chance of hooking into that spring creek fish. And if you're a new angler just rolling in the area, come to precision fly fishing and say, hey, here's where we're fishing, try to fish those riffles first. And you'll find yourself much better. Once you get used to those conditions, then try those flats. Challenge yourself, and you'll find these spring creeks that you're scared to fish, don't want to fish, very much a privilege to fish.
Okay. So the biggest advice you're giving there too is you could get beat up on a spring creek your first time out. Don't give up. It's yes. Something that once you achieve it, you've accomplished something.
Absolutely. I've been fly fishing these spring creeks for well over 35 years, and it's still a love-hate relationship.
I have a lot of hate days.
Yes. But they challenge you, they make you a better fly fisherman, but it's just sometimes, just like one of my friends down in Chambersburg said, Bruce, he'll fish the lower end of the Fallen Springs day in, day out. For him to catch one fish in the upper end of the Fallen Springs is a privilege to him.
Mm-hmm. And I would agree. Upper end's tough.
Yes.
So we just had a viewer ask a question, not to get off track to some of our other questions, but one of the concerns, and we get this here in the shop, especially some of our older customers that come in, and the Letort's notorious for this, is one of their concerns is the muck and getting stuck. Do you find that our spring creeks, Fallen Springs, Big Spring, Letort, we do have a different gradient, and it is mucky. How does that angler approach that? The middle of Letort there, especially down in Vence's Meadows, where you can sink to your knee.
Yes.
And
you can lose hip boots.
Correct. Any advice for those anglers?
I tend not to, kind of like Ed Shank, I tend not to kind of wade the Letort a lot. Mm-hmm. I tend to fish from the bank simply because, yes, the muck, on Big Springs, the muck, someplace in Fallen Springs, you can find trouble. In those situations, I love a small rod, but in those situations, I will go with a longer rod, so I can reach across. There are situations, and I can tell you a story. Years ago, I was guiding a guy on the Letort, nailed a nice brown trout right in Mariner's Meadow. Wrapped around a tree branch, and I'm not letting this fish go for this guy because I wanted him to have a picture of it. I jumped in. I went in. He's pulling me out while I have this fish in my hand. So these streams, are not dangerous, but you do got to watch yourself. there are any trout, but certainly work around the muck. What I tend to do is if you see the stream itself, if you can envision the way the water flow is, you can see where there's muck and you can see where there's kind of stable bank.
Correct.
Put your foot in first, let it sit. I call it baby stepping. It's a wading technique, even I do in flat water. But if you notice yourself going in, then it's probably time to get back out.
Correct. And one other thing for our viewers, that is something to reach out to your local shops and ask if you know you're going to be fishing an area that you're questioning. We can help you out with that.
Yes.
One of the things you said there a second ago, and I just want to make sure people caught that. Two questions ago, you said think like a predator. And then just a second ago, you said you don't wade the Latort. You try to avoid wading. With our spring creeks, one of the things, as a fly fisherman, as a fisherman, we have a tendency to just want to jump in the water and get in. And I think one of the things I've learned from you, learned from your book, and learned from watching anglers over the years and guiding myself is with the Latort, with the big spring and falling springs. And yellow breeches, this method applies to many of our streams, is don't jump right in the water. Is try to stay on the bank. Try to keep your noise down. And would you agree with that?
Yes. Yeah. With the spring creeks are very unique because freestones have them, but spring creeks are very unique because they have this little wonderful thing called undercut banks. And sometimes these undercut banks can be up to 4 feet back in. And you're literally tramping on the trout. You may not think they know you, but if you're stomping around, they sense the vibrations. A lot of times I've taken rods and been back off the bank 5-6 feet and drifting streamers. Say I'm sitting here, here's the undercut bank, I'm literally just doing this, drifting a streamer, and I'm standing 4 feet off the bank.
And they're getting sucked up under.
Yes.
Yep. One of the things I think, and not my last question, but close to my last question, and something that I have followed you on Facebook over the years, your son Fisher's here with us tonight. And something I admire about you, and as you know, my job, I work with kids.
Yes.
I have a 9 and 10-year-old son and daughter at home. And if we want this sport to continue, both from a conservation perspective, both from the fly shops and tackle shops, and just keeping young people involved, I have watched your son grow as a fisherman over the years. And for many of our viewers out there, not just a fly fisherman, Mike has taken Fisher through all the stages of fishing, and he's becoming a fly fisherman. Talk to me about it, Mike, for the grandparents, the parents out there of young sons and daughters. What is the advice that you would give them in getting our young people into the sport and transitioning from the conventional tackle or spinning gear into the fly gear? And how did you know when Fisher was ready to start transitioning into a fly rod?
Getting the kids out there is great. I'm blessed to take kids out there. Just taking Fishers out there has been a joy. Taking all the kids out fishing out there has been a blast. Getting involved. One, their touch of nature is very nice to have, but once they get involved, it's traditional tackle, stuff like that. Have them catching some fish. Don't let them get bored. Be very patient with them. Figure out their time span. See if they're, get bored in 3 or 4 hours or whatnot, and just enjoy their time. And then expand on it. If they enjoy, start with the traditional bait and stuff like that. Get them catching fish, move them to some lures, have them catching some fish with some lures, much like I did with fishery. Started using rubbers, started using some jigs, and then get him a fly rod. Fisher got his first fly rod here. 2 weeks later, he caught his first trout on Big Springs.
Fisher, there's many people ahead. It took more than 2 weeks, like 2 years to catch your first trout in Big Spring. So now you do have excellent
Yeah.
dad as a coach here.
But at that point, and just talk to him about how much the experience of catching a trout with a fly is.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not using scent, you're not using this. And, just get them involved, keep them comfortable. One of the best things I did with fishing with the fly rod was, I did take him trout fishing,
Mm-hmm.
but was able to teach him not try casting right off the bat, just regular flip cast and
Yep.
drift. But once he started casting was find that bluegill pond. Get that bluegill pond. Because I've learned with the kids that's never cast a fly rod, if they can get out there and cast a little bit and I teach them how to strip.
Mm-hmm.
So once you get to the trout stream, water's coming back to you, you got to pull that line back in.
Correct.
But a bluegill is going to hit. And a bluegill's not going to sip it, they're going to take it.
Yeah.
And
Mike, I still get excited catching bluegill.
Absolutely. I love bluegills. And they can hook, they got to fish. They got to fish on that fly rod. And at that point, they're addicted. And then you just transition from there.
Well, I agree. I introduced my two kids this year slowly on Kettle Creek to fly rods and had a great experience. And they still love throwing worms and panther martins and just fishing. But is there any advice that you can give? Does it matter? Do you think when you got Fisher into it, just a recommended rod, not rod name, just a rod length and weight? What do you seem to think works best for that 12 to 13, 14-year-old young person that's getting started?
A medium action rod works well with a beginner.
Mm-hmm.
If you get like an 8-foot,
Mm-hmm.
and we can go into many different things with some of the stuff we talked about tonight.
Yep.
But I like a medium action for the beginners. Get a 5-weight for them.
Okay.
Because a 5-weight you can catch small bluegills. And this is why I can parlay back down through one of the Spring Creek things I do with leaders is I'll have 2 different spools, a nymph leader, dry leader. But with the 8-foot 5-weight, get them in the bluegills. Catch the small bluegills, 5-weight works for trout. Say they really start advancing, really want to do well, really want to start fishing dry flies. Buy that extra spool for that reel.
Mm-hmm.
Throw a 4-weight on it. Then you got a nice dry fly line.
Okay.
And you can pop in and out. If they're fishing bluegills, if they're fishing dries, you can do that for the trout.
Well, Mike, thank you for your time here tonight.
Thank you.
For everybody out there, again, if you have questions for Mike Heck that we weren't able to get to tonight, we did have some questions come in. If you have questions for Mike, please reach out to us at marketing@precisionflyandtackle.com. If there's somebody you want to see us interview in the future, please reach out to us. We will we'll reach out to them. We probably have a contact with them, and we'll do that. Again, I've said in many of our videos, if there's something you'd like us to bring in, product or whatnot, please reach out to us. Again, if you have any questions for Precision Fly and Tackle, you can call us at 717-486-4646. You can find us at precisionflyandtackle.com. Again, we can't thank our viewers and everybody out there enough for continuing to support us. We appreciate you following us on Facebook and Instagram. Don't forget, if you missed some of this video, you can find it on YouTube here in the next couple days. We'll get that uploaded, this live interview with Mike, on our YouTube channel. Again, please continue to share. We really thank all of our guests, our customers, and our viewers. Thanks again. Everybody stay safe and healthy, and we look forward to seeing everybody in the shop when we can open up full time again. Thanks again.